Every Rust player should understand how to create an auto-sorting system. The circuit that I'm showcasing in this video is a simplified version of a much larger system, but I didn't want to scramble your brain since it's my first industrial video, so I figured we'd start off with a simple foundation to learn. I like to use small batteries and 1 or 2 solar panels to power up to 15 conveyors at a time, because that way I can save my larger batteries for SAM sites and auto turrets. And since each conveyor has a pass-through, that means we don't really need much fancy circuitry here, we just have to power the input and the pass-through on each one continues on. Before I describe the circuit itself, I've got 2 ways to explain to you how it works so that it makes more sense when we're going over the entire thing. So to start off, we have these things called Depo boxes. You place these outside in your compound, anywhere you want really, and each of them will be connected to their own unique buffer box. You can see over there on our main circuit, we've got 3 of our Depo boxes located outside, and each one of them is connected to its own buffer box on the inside of the base that sucks all of the loot out of the Depo box with a conveyor that has no filters on it. All of the outputs of these buffer boxes are then connected together with combiners and then put into a splitter. And then this splitter, which is all of the buffer box combined, will be extended with more splitters so that we can pull specific things from the buffer boxes to sort in their retrospective areas. And what I like to do is pull the ore directly out of the buffer boxes, the wood from the main line, and then use this to run our automated smelter. The output of the furnaces is then connected to its own room, and also the buffer box connected directly to this room, bypassing the furnaces in case any refined resources are dropped in the Depo boxes. And then at this point you can quite easily automatically upkeep your TC and extend the main line from the buffer boxes further to separate all your random items, your components, your weapons and armor, and then once you get your weapons and armor and meds and all that set up, you'll be able to create an automatic Hazy refill kit, which is just the easiest one to set up in a locker with industrial. And then of course you want something to remove the rocks and torches because that is annoying. So let's take a look at this from an even more simple perspective. We have this purple box which represents our Depo. All of that gets sucked into our base, into our buffer room, which then is connected to this giant cyan block representing our splitters, which we use to call specific items from our buffer to organize elsewhere. This orange box represents our ore getting smelted, refined into the red box, and we've also got a bypass from the buffer directly to the refined resources in case anything is placed in the Depo like charcoal or fragments. We then move on to the splitters, and you can see here on this yellow branch how I have all of these yellow boxes chained together. That represents the ability to expand the storage on each of these branches that are connected by an arrow. So we could quite easily expand any of these into multiple box loot rooms. And then on the left side here, you can see we've got our weapons, ammo, all of that we would combine and connect to something like a locker for an auto refill kit. And this blue and purple box represents the ability to split armor from clothing, for example, or if you wanted to split high tier weapons from low tier weapons, that's something you would do in between boxes outside of the main branch. So moving on to the actual circuit, I've pre-built everything and I'll have a Rustrician link in the description. And I'm basically just going to be describing the circuit, the flow of events that occurs, and things that you can change for yourself. Something like this is extremely complicated and difficult to describe to somebody who doesn't understand it. So I figured this was the best way to go about it instead of watching me sit here and wire things up for 35 minutes. You'll have this link in the description, and compared to the image I just showed you a little bit ago, this is way more HD. You can zoom in, it's interactive, you'll be able to follow along with what I'm talking about, and you'll have this to refer to in the future, overall making it a lot more easy to describe something of this complexity. So to start off, we've got our Depo boxes on the outside of our base, and each one of these has their own line connected to its own conveyor, connected to its own buffer box. And we're using combiners to extend the range of these to connect to the conveyor, but these boxes themselves are not combined together. Heading inside to the left, we can see these 3 conveyors connected to their own Depo box, and the output of each of these are connected to their own buffer box, indicated by the green, yellow, and red line. This will allow us to suck the loot from the outside Depo boxes inside as quickly as possible, and then the output of each of these buffer boxes are combined together over to the left here, indicated by the cyan, which is going to be our main line for the future. By using a second adapter on each buffer box, we can then connect all these orange lines out to a separate conveyor here, which pulls the ore directly out of the buffer box, clearing up some space, and this prevents our Depo boxes from getting clogged up after your farmer comes back. And then we've also extended a second box in the bottom right side of that loot room back there for extra ore, and you can add a couple more if you need to. The output of that box is then connected into our auto furnace right here. And if we take a look back at the Rustrician, you can see we've got our buffer boxes pulling the ore out to the right side here, connected to our auto furnace, which we'll go over in a minute. And then we've also got a secondary line that turns into our main sorting line, and we'll be moving all of our extra resources like stone and scrap and all that over into their own sorted boxes. So to do that, we put a splitter on the end of the combiner that's taking all of our buffer boxes out, and and then we split off each conveyor to its own resources. So I like to put all of these types of things in their own box, and then I'll split these off in the future for crafting. We've got one for the stone as well, which is up here indicated by the yellow pipe. And in this case, you can see that we're filled up on stone. So this is a good time to show an example of how we can extend this loot room to include more boxes. We've got this industrial output already connected to this small box here, so all we got to do is get another box placed down and split it in between those two connections. So we'll get the storage adapter down, grab our pipe tool, and right-click on one of the outputs, connect it into here, and simply reconnect that. And now you'll see that the stone is split into this box as well as the other two. So then on the top right, we've got our wood, which is connected to our furnaces, and below that we have our ore split off from the other room with the buffer boxes, and then all of our random extra resources like low-grade scrap, leather, all that down in the bottom left. And we'll be using this to connect to our industrial crafter later on, which right now we are pulling from the output of this box over to our tier 2 workbench. And we've got our conveyor right here set to items that we would need for crafting, whatever it might be. And then that will be placed into this small box down here. We've also got the output of our refined resources coming after the furnaces combined into this conveyor as well, so we can get metal fragments and HQM over here. So now let's take a look at what I've got going on to 100% automate the furnaces fully to smelt your resources and to also provide you with charcoal. And this is the same thing that you'll use for oil refineries, which you can simply replace these furnaces with in the future once you are moving on to electrical furnaces. So to reiterate, we've got our Depo boxes going into the buffer, and those buffer have a secondary adapter which is pulling all of the ore directly into our auto furnace igniting system, which then goes into the furnaces, is pulled out into a separate loot room full of refined resources, where we then extract the charcoal into its own loot room. We can use this loot room to do things like auto upkeep our TC and pull out resources for crafting. I've pulled this section of the circuit out because it's quite a bit complex if you've never used something like this before. So to go over it very quickly, we've got two boxes here. One of them is for wood and one of them is for ore. And once ore is deposited in this box, the bottom conveyor will automatically start sucking it out and turn on the wood conveyor above it, allowing it to start the furnaces as well by utilizing the toggle on feature of a timer with the filter pass on the wood conveyor at the top. The filter fail and the filter pass are set to turn off and turn on the wood, so that when the ore passes through, the filter pass will initiate the wood conveyor to turn on, and once the ore is finished smelting, the filter fail will turn off the wood conveyor, allowing the furnaces to finish burning the wood that they have and turn themselves on. And the cycle repeats once you've depoted more ore into the ore box. And then, of course, all the refined resources are getting pulled out into their own box as well. And this fully 100% automates this entire system, and this can be used on large furnaces and oil refineries as well. So here you can see we've got our mainline splitter in the center there, and then our refined resources are combined from the buffer box and the output of the furnaces to be pulled into this loot room, which is then pulled into the splitter with the gray lines to extract the charcoal from the refined resources. So looking at our Rustrician chart, you can see we've already done all this over here. We've got our auto TC upkeep, our refined resources furnaces, and we're going to extend the mainline further now and add another source of power, because at this point we've used 15 conveyors, and we're going to start splitting the main line off into more specific things like meds and food, weapons and ammo, and clothing, which you can see here after our refined resource room. It gets quite simple. We just pull splitters off into the center of the wall here, and then if we need more splitters for more conveyors to do more specific things in each loot room, we just add an extra splitter there and define the filters on each conveyor for the items we want to go in each room. If we take a step back, you can see our splitter in the center of the room indicated by the cyan pipe connected to the output of all of our buffer boxes, which we then split off to another splitter further down the line, as well as add two conveyors here, which are pulling components into this top loot room. Our components are overflowing into our buffer boxes, so to alleviate this problem, we can simply just add another box and do what we did with the stone by taking the output of this, pressing shift to put the pipe on the box if you want to make it look pretty, and then connecting it up. And then this will allow all of our extra components that are stuck in our buffer room to pull through over to here. And then underneath this loot room with my components, I have all of my explosives. I like to keep my components and explosives bundled together in the same loot room, and I make that one the most important one to protect at all costs. This is also the loot room that likes to cause the most trouble because things like rockets are classified as ammo, so when you get to your ammo loot room, you're going to have to manually label all of the ammo types that you want in there so that the rockets don't get sucked up over to a box they're not supposed to be in. Moving on, we pulled a splitter over here and added a second splitter for 3 conveyors, and we've got our food, our med syringes, and then a bunch of random items on the bottom. And if we take a look at that filter, you can see I've got BP deployables, traps, electrical, construction, and fun. The BP deployables is like the items tab when you press F1. And this will allow us to keep our buffer boxes clean by pulling all the random crap out of it so that it doesn't get clogged up and stop working. This loot room fills up with junk the most often, so this is where you have to come clean it out to make sure that the system doesn't clog up. You could also add another conveyor on the last output of that loot room and filter things out even further, like barricades and all that. And here we simply got tools being pulled from the main line into their own box, and this is also where you'll find supply signals. And then at the end of the line, I'll have my weapons, armor, clothing, and our auto locker refill kit. And if we come take a look at the Rustrician, you can see we've got our main line pulled over here, we've got our clothing and armor pulled off of it, and we've also got our weapons and ammo pulled off of it, and then the output of all of those are combined alongside med syringes and food to be pushed into an auto locker refill kit. In-game, we can see our mainline splitter pulled with weapons at the top, ammo in the center, and clothing at the bottom. And like I said earlier, we've got our ammo types manually labeled so that the rockets don't get pulled over here through the ammo filter. On the bottom here, we've got our clothing, which includes all of the hazmats and swimsuits and armor alongside all the clothing. So we're taking the output of this clothing box to its own conveyor where we can then specify things that we want to extract from the clothing box. And right here, I've got armor and backpacks. And you'll also want to include another one of these for something like hazmats, because these usually fill up quite quickly, and also the scuba gear, which can clutter up this box, causing a clog in the entire system. But as you can see here, we don't have much more room to add more storage adapters. So in this case, what we can do here is add our last storage adapter, connect this up to another box, and then use that other box to apply more filters via more storage adapters. And then above this room is quite simple. We just have our weapons in the top left here, and we don't have any of them split out in here. So the same thing we did at the bottom with the clothing, you can also do with this to separate the tiers of weapons. And then on the right side, we have all of our ammo. And the green pipe that you see everywhere is the outputs of all the boxes that we want to combine together for our auto locker refill kit. So we've got our food, med syringes, ammo, weapons, and our hazmats. Just a bunch of combiners all pulling all of these things together. You can see here our weapons and ammo are combined through one, our hazmats are down here, and then we've got our med syringes and ammo pulled into another combiner, and then we combine those combiners into a combiner, and the final output goes into this conveyor. You want to make sure that you set limits on these, otherwise you'll get a bunch of repeat items in the same slot. And I personally think having food in each of these slots is one of the most important items so that you can not waste all the med syringes since you have limited space. And you can see once a kit is taken, it fully automatically refills itself, and if you take multiple kits at the same time, the locker will also refill without duplicating items in any of these slots. And then on the last storage adapter, you want to put this conveyor, which will pull out all of the rocks and torches, allowing the auto refill kit to properly reset. There's only a few more things to discuss to close this off, which is the card box. You'll need a specific conveyor set to pull the cards out. I'll usually just put this on my components room, but in some cases you have a lot of fuses and a lot of cards. You might want to do that on its own. And then having an industrial crafter is one of the most powerful things in the game. So that box I talked about earlier, where we split off all of our random crafting resources to our tier 2 workbench, is where we'll be pulling items off into our industrial crafter, which at this point in the circuit is going to require you to create a third source of power, and you'll have an excess amount of 14 units to use for something else. You can see here our player crafting workbench has all the resources that we talked about earlier getting pulled off from that conveyor, and then if we follow the red line all the way over to the industrial crafter, this is going into its own conveyor, and its filters are set to the specific resources and amount of these resources that the BP inside of the crafter needs to craft. And we've also got like something like 3 bandages in here to prevent it from overcrafting once the boxes fill up or the max amount of output is reached that you've set on the filter for the output of this crafter. And you can see here we've got this conveyor connected to the output of the crafter into its own box right here. But if you wanted these syringes to get put into the system and auto sorted to where they should be so that you can refill things like your auto locker kit, you simply grab the output of that box and plug it into this Depo box. You don't need a conveyor because the end of this box already has a conveyor. And you can do this with absolutely anything to cycle it through the system, including adding more Depo boxes to that one Depo box. But keep in mind, if you add more Depo boxes to this Depo box, it's not going to be connected to its own conveyor. And that might mean if you put too much stuff inside of it, it will take a little bit longer than it should to get inside of your base. And with that, we are done with this foundational auto sorting circuit, which can be used into something much, much larger. As you could tell in the video, there is not a lot of loot space, which can be expanded and refined. And there's so many things that you can do with this. I hope that this video format, along with the Rustrician link, was a lot more interesting to follow along with, rather than watching me wire everything up over double the amount of time that would take. And for sticking around till the end of the video, I thought I would tell you about this Rust Conveyor Filters website. When you're in game and looking at a filter, you can hold Shift and it'll allow you to copy and paste JSON files, which is how you can save the filter settings on the conveyors. And this website has a lot of pre-configured JSON files that you can copy, and when you paste them in an editor, it looks like this. But when you're in game, it will paste the filter itself into the game on that conveyor. And that's all I got for you guys today. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video, leave a dislike if you didn't, and I'll catch you in the next one.